Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Center Court session on the Goizueta Business School at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. We have with us a good old friend, Brian Mitchell, who has been in charge of the MBA program and that whole learning experience for a good number of years. He knows Emory like very few people know Emory. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And you say that, I start counting the years. It reminds me how many years it's been. And wow, it's been a long time, but I wouldn't still be here if I didn't love it. So it's great to be with you again.
Absolutely. And, one thing I want to make clear to everyone out there is job placement, okay? When it comes to actually landing a really good, solid job out of an MBA program, there are a few MBA programs in the world that beat Goizueta's record. I mean, year in and year out, you're at the top or close to the very top of the best schools with the best placement records. What's the secret to that?
Well, the students ask the same question, John, and I tell them, I'll give you the same answer, which is there's really not a secret, right? It's about connecting the dots between how we teach and how they learn, and understanding that those things are related to outcomes. A lot of times MBA students, sometimes skip over the part where the work needs to be done and come back to business school because that's a big win for them. They've disrupted a lot of their lives to come back to school, and their eyes already, 2 steps ahead on the job. And part of my job is to help remind them that to not only to get the job, but to be able to do it well, there's a big part that happens around your learning and around your experiences. And the way we teach and learn here, I think, is the not so secret method to the madness. So, all credit to our faculty and our staff that do the curricular and co-curricular programming to set up an experience that does put our students in the category, I would say, of being highly capable and highly relatable, which makes an individual, I think, easy to hire.
Yeah, and I should point out, not to get into the nitty gritty, but I love getting into nitty gritty. I'm going to just say that years ago, and I'm talking about many years ago, Goizueta was one of the first business schools to take its MBA curriculum and front load it. Yeah. And here's what I mean by that. You come early on, you start the program early, and you basically get the essential core disciplinary courses out of the way. So you begin to take electives in your first year, and not just 1 or 2, but a few of them, so that when you arrive for your internship, you're head and shoulders above many of your peers from other business schools. Now, a lot of other business schools have kind of basically imitated Goizueta's pioneering innovation here, but nonetheless, you guys have had an incredible success in turning those internships into full-time job offers, so that come year 2 and the MBAs come back, they've got in their pocket a great job offer that they can accept, and they can focus on studies and getting to know each other and networking and global immersions, which we're going to talk about because Brian just got back from Korea on one.
That's right.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. And you're right. We're going through a curriculum review right now, which, we do that on a periodic basis. And we're looking at how important that continues to be able to get our students as many reps, putting the functional basics into practice before you get on your summer internship. One of the things we've added since that original version that you're remembering, we've added our client-facing projects all happen in the first year spring semester. So not only do our students have the core functional courses and some electives, but they also have, and all of them do this, they also have a full-on client-facing project before their summer internship. And I think that's one of the keys to success as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. That also gives you something more to talk about.
Sure.
And really gets you working in a team in a collaborative way, the way you're going to do when you go on your internship or you get your full-time job offer. Okay. Now you just came back from Korea.
Yes.
On a global immersion. Where does that fall in the MBA curriculum, and what role does it play?
So it's a great question, because we're also very intentional about that. And so just like I mentioned, our client-facing projects, what we call our impact projects, the client projects are in the spring. That's kind of the last thing that a first-year student does that is part of the first-year experience, except for when they're done with all of the on-campus classes. Now our first year, we call them GEMs, Global Experiential Modules. Our first year GEMs happen immediately after classes end. So we go, after you finish your impact project, you get a little bit of a breather, and then you're off to your global experiential module. And we do them for first year students. And I was part of the leadership for South Korea. We also did South Africa, and we also did a combo of Germany and Austria. And so we do them early enough in May so that they're done. We always make sure they're done well before Memorial Day, which gives students another breather before their summer internships. And to the point you made, it is a great lead in to the summer internship because it helps you contextualize the learning that you just spent a year really working on. Putting that into
Right.
now you get to put that into a global context, look at it through a global lens. So we do first year GEMs in May, and then you have a second opportunity as a second year to do it in January and we have different destinations and strategic initiatives linked to those. So you have a couple of different options.
So what kind of things did you do in Korea with the students?
We do a mix of business visits and learning about the economic situation and initiatives that are linked to our own strategic initiatives, which in the case of Korea, we do a lot of thinking and learning about innovation and technology, right?
Makes sense.
But we are very deliberate about balancing that with history, culture, a little bit of language, but we build cultural competence in a way that I think is really special for us. So it's not every day in a boardroom. We do, probably half of it is corporate stuff, but the other half is really deliberate about learning about the Korean culture and history that sort of shaped the nation. Because if you're gonna expect to work and certainly lead in other parts of the world, you have to have this cultural competence that isn't always natural to us as Americans. We don't always grow up thinking about things through other people's lenses. So we have to learn that, and we have to be intentional about teaching that. So that's a big part of our GEMs.
That's great. So what you're hearing here, okay, you start early, you get the essential education, the core of the MBA done relatively early compared to many other schools. You get deep electives, you get a project that you work on with a team and present to a client, you get a global immersion. All of this is very intentional. And I want to point out, Brian, that I remember when you took a leave and went to Harvard Graduate School of Education and got your master's degree in higher educational leadership, that you were really thinking about the future of MBA education and how it can best be structured to have a real learning impact. Yes. And I'm thinking that some of these elements really resonated when you really studied them and looked at what other schools were doing. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. My master's thesis was on global partnerships between business schools, because I do think that the future of business and thus the future of business education is largely global, right? It is us taking advantage of the fact that the world is shrinking from the standpoint of being able to communicate, being able to participate, meet, travel, and so on. That's a big part of the future of how we teach and learn. And so even then, when I was studying it in the classroom, I was thinking about ways to put that into practice in our curricular and co-curricular experiences. And I do think that that's a big advantage. It's been a competitive advantage for us at Goizueta, and it puts our students in an advantaged way. Because everything that you just described when you were talking about our method, all that happens even before the summer internship.
Right.
So I mean, these students are loaded by the time they get to their summer with the full-on experience, and I think that means a lot to the way they embrace the learning.
Totally. Obviously, a couple of these things are key hallmarks of the MBA program. What else would you consider to be true strengths of the MBA program at Goizueta?
Well, at Goizueta, I think a true strength of ours is we're intentionally small. And, you know, most really good business schools are also really big places and spaces. You know this better than anyone, having seen it all. And so it's not uncommon for business schools at the very top to have incoming classes of 1,000 students or 800 students. We are in the neighborhood of 130, 140 students in our incoming class, and that is by design. Right? And that's not an accident. If we wanted to grow, we would be building new buildings and growing bigger. But that's never been our strategy. Our strategy, and I do think it comes through as a big advantage for us, especially for this coming generation of students, is that we get to see you as a whole person. And we get there's no hiding here, right? And so you get the elite level of graduate business education, but you get that in an environment where you can be your full self, where you can be seen, where you can participate, where you can lead, be heard, and be challenged in ways that I think are really unique to a place that is as small as we are. I mean, you've been here and have interacted with my students alongside of me, and you've seen that I know them, I know their names, I know their stories. I'm not just meeting them for the first time when they cross the stage at graduation.
And Brian, they know you.
Yes, they do. And all of our faculty who teach them in the classroom every day. And so that makes it feel a very different, you know, sort of environment that's not just fluff. Those aren't just words. The power of this community for someone who really is trying to have a transformative experience when they come to business school, I think that's really unique in an environment like Goizueta. So I think that's kind of a big strength of ours.
Yeah, that's a big point and an important one to make. This is no MBA factory churning out loads of people, many of whom never get to know each other or even be able to say hi to each other. Everyone knows each other really well. And here's another element of the placement record. I know that the faculty get actively engaged in some of the job searches of the students, which is rare for most business schools. And that's another part of the secret sauce at Goizueta.
Yep, and I'll speak for myself. And I'm among many of our faculty and leaders who have private sector experience. One of the reasons I had to go back to school to study higher ed is because my background is not in higher ed. I spent 20 years in pharma before coming here. So we sold our company to Abbott in 2010, and that opened the space for me to come here in 2011. What that means, though, is that I've got a deep network of contacts in that business, right? In the pharma sector, whether it's on the industry side or the consulting side. And so I, along with several of my colleagues, spend a good bit of time introducing students, personally preparing students for all kinds of interactions, formal interviews, coffee chats, networking. And that is part of what I think makes us a pretty unique community and contributes to the success of a lot of our students.
Yeah, really true. And the other thing I think is, and this is not true of many schools, there is a lot of innovation going on in the program. Okay, so when I was in Atlanta a couple of months ago, and I got to visit the campus, one of the things that I tried out was your virtual reality exercise in negotiation. And I've got to say, you know, I've been involved in VR exercises in many schools all over the world. And this was, to me, the best implementation of VR with a really strong purpose in trying to negotiate with a difficult person on the other side of the room. How do you respond to that person? How do they respond back to you? And then the analysis that comes out of it was sensational.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, we have a lot of innovative faculty and people who've worked on that. You can also thank COVID for our ability to really practice and hone in on and spend our time developing not just the technology, but to your point, how do you implement that in a way that gives the kind of experience for the learner that is not just, it's not like watching it on a screen.
No,
it's not purely a two-dimensional experience. It takes advantage of technology. And we talk about the future of business and business school all the time. these tools, I mean, look at the way how easy it is for us to just connect on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, just like that across the world. Now with VR, it becomes even easier to really feel like you're part of a conversation or part of a deal. And then again, you made the point about the analysis afterwards, right? You're capturing all this data that is both to do with the content of what you said, but also body language, also the nuances, right? All these little things that now we're able to actually capture with facial recognition and the, all of the machine learning that goes into these, it's out of this world.
No,
And
it's very cool.
yeah, and if we're not keeping up with that, then we're falling behind in many more ways than one. So I'm happy that you had a chance to experience that. It's
It's
one of the
great.
ways that we stay on the cutting edge here.
And I want to underline the fact that this is not off the shelf. This is a program created by one of your faculty members who's really innovative. She's a real superstar, and this is a really special and unique experience. And I bring that up because, many schools are taking an off-the-shelf program of this or that and throwing MBA students into it. And frankly, it's more a game, like a video game, than it is a real teaching exercise the way it is at Goizueta. Let's talk about 4 different things that are very prominent right now: diversity, equity, inclusion,
Okay.
Business analytics, sustainability, and least of all, but not really least of all, is artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, Bard, and how all that is changing education.
All
Let's
right.
start with Goizueta. What's going on with diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because I know the school has staked out a leadership position in the field.
We have, and I'm paying particularly close attention to the national dialogue right now. That is a lot of pushback from, one aspect of the political spectrum is pushing back really hard, not only on DEI in general, but DEI in higher education. So I'm paying very close attention to that because
And I should point out a likely Supreme Court decision that will be fairly negative.
right is coming any day now. Frankly, about race-based admissions, or the role that race can play in admissions, that's coming any day now, and I'm watching that very closely. Part of the reason is because of how forward we have been at Goizueta on teaching about the value of inclusive spaces in the business world, and the value of launching, working on, growing products and services that reflect the market that you're trying to serve, the value of being with people who have different backgrounds and experiences than you have. We've been very forward about that. We were among the first, and I'll give credit where credit's due, where we were with Kellogg at the same time as launching a concentration. They call it a pathway. We call it a concentration in diversity, equity, and inclusion. A few years ago, after the summer of 2020, we put our courses together, a few that we had and a few that we were creating, to create a pathway for people that really want to go deep in this area. And it has been one of the most popular things that we've done by students who, don't all look the same. I'll put it that way, right? This is an interest to this generation of students, regardless of what they look like, where they come from, and so on. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So we really have fed that here at Goizueta to complement the things that we do on the kind of traditional business side. So you're going to be a better consultant if you understand the value of a diverse workforce and an inclusive spaces. You're going to be a better marketer when you understand the world as a place of diverse people and backgrounds and needs and wants from a marketing standpoint. And you can go down the line. So I think that has served us exceedingly well. And I can tell you that as this pushback continues to come, we're going to stand firm in our ability and our willingness and our leadership in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's just part of who we are. We benefit very much from being in Atlanta,
Absolutely.
kind of the cradle of the civil rights movement back in the 60s and before, and we take advantage of that. We don't shy away from that. We welcome students who really embrace that here at Goizueta.
And today you're still, among just a handful of schools that have developed a concentration in the area and a real true focus. In other words, you're walking the talk. Okay.
Right. And you know me, I'm a believer in that. I think it's not enough to just say it.
Yeah.
We all put out statements in the summer of 2020. Everybody did that, and we should have. That's not nothing. But that alone would not be enough. We really do have to have to walk the walk, and I think that's really important.
What are you doing in business analytics? It's clear that more and more companies are demanding. Uh, they've always demanded analytical ability from MBAs, but the overwhelming amount of data that companies are collecting on customers, suppliers, and everything under the sun, and their inability to frankly weed through all that data and make it useful for decision making has led to a bigger emphasis on the analysis and how you take data from different places and try to make it more useful.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna nerd out on you a little bit here.
Yeah, please. I like nerdy stuff.
Well, because our home university, Emory University, one of my goals is that we stay closely connected to the resources and the history and the values of Emory, even though we are a unit of Emory as the Goizueta, the business school. And I say that because what Emory is best known for are the sciences, right? We're a great medical school, medical community, and the sciences are what has made Emory such a world-renowned institution. That does trickle on to us here in the business school. And so we've always taught our functional disciplines with science in mind, right? We've always taught marketing as a science, and we've always like a behavioral science. We've
Right.
always taught even accounting. And so our roots are based in being that level of analysis around the data, around the decisions, around the disciplines. And so this idea of business analytics is actually very closely related to how we have naturally thought and taught for years around analyzing all of this data and coming up with a different and better outcome. So a few years ago, we launched a program separate from our MBA program, a Master's of Science in Business Analytics. And that program took off like a rocket. I mean, hugely popular. And we're in our fourth year of it now. What that allowed us to do is develop content, new faculty, new content for existing faculty that
Right.
as an MBA program now we can pull from. And
Yeah.
we have been doing that for the last several years that we've had the MSBA program. That is what allowed us to become a fully STEM designated MBA program. So we fully STEM for all of our students now. We have all of those electives that exist in the MSBA, Masters of Science and Business Analytics. Our students can take them now. And this year, right now, our one-year MBA cohort, we just launched a dual degree MBA, MSBA degree. And so it is a really cool time to be at Goizueta. Also, we have a new dean, as you know,
Yes.
Gareth James, who built his entire career as a statistics professor and someone who, talk about nerding out, someone who really understands, gets it, and gets excited about this as a growth area for us. So our next several years going down this path are going to be, they're going to be exciting.
And you're doubling the size of that Master's in Business Analytics program.
Well, that, and we're adding additional specialized programs that deal with different kind of nuanced aspects of analytics. So we've got masters now of analytical finance,
Right.
as our latest launched specialized master's program, and there are more to come.
Yeah. Sustainability. Is that something that's important at Goizueta these days?
Ask any MBA student who's going to any line of business, not just at Goizueta. I will say this is what I do love about business education, graduate business education, because I get exposed to a lot of my colleagues at a lot of schools around the world, and we talk about this generation of students, not just our students.
Right.
And I can tell you that our students in this way are very much representative of this generation of students who care deeply about the planet, the climate, going back to our, inclusion, equitable, gender equity, poverty elimination, all of these big global societal issues that we all share, whether we like to acknowledge that or not. These are issues that we all share. This generation of students is very plugged into that. And so we are not just responsive to that, but we've been leading the way in business and society, the intersection between business and society for years. So we've had an Institute for Business and Society, and it continues to thrive here at Goizueta. There's a very specific focus in that group on climate. And we're part of Climate Cat. We're part of, all of these consortia and initiatives that help us with experiential learning.
Wow, right.
On areas like climate and things like climate. In fact, last year, one of our global experiential modules went to Norway, and they did a glacial hike to actually see and feel the effects of climate change, up there in that part of the world. And I just think that is the kind of unique experience that, we can teach and learn about in the classroom, but the extent to which we're taking students, we had a professor actually who was, Renee Dye is her name, professor, who was very enthusiastic about seeing it and putting hands on it and doing that glacial hike. Man, that's taking it to a level that I'm not sure you can match anywhere.
That's really true. And since you mentioned, I'm going to take a quick detour here, the societal challenges that are on the minds of many of the younger generation and how you're addressing them. It reminds me of the need for talking about the skeptics of business education. I know that there are a lot of people in this younger generation who may be thinking about an MBA, and maybe their friends are saying, "Are you kidding me?" Because there is this anti-capitalist vein out there. And I know you feel very strongly about this, because the truth is, no matter what you do in life, whether it's nonprofit, working for the government, working in education, management and leadership are crucial aspects to being able to perform at a level to make meaningful change happen. And this is where the MBA comes into play.
No question about it. And this is a soapbox I can climb on and stand on for a long time. If you expect or desire to lead in any way, in any area, then you have to know how to keep an organization viable. You have to know how to make an organization attractive, meaning how to market it. You have to know how to grow it. You have to know how to treat your people. You have to know how to manage talent. And those kinds of things that are sometimes, and it's particularly in the kind of lay press, kind of poo-pooed as soft skills, or you don't really need to, you can do this without that. That's a house of cards that we're frankly seeing play out in so many different aspects of business and society. We're seeing it play out by, so-called leaders who don't have a business education and who are failing at things that we would have taught you in business class. We would have taught you in business school. We would have taught you effective communication. We would have taught you financial management and financial discipline. And so I think that that's certainly a message that I try to get across to people who are skeptics of learning about business. I think we can all criticize capitalism as a purist thing, but we also all have to acknowledge the power of capitalism in a prosperous and thriving world. And so there's a nuance there that I think needs to be talked about.
That's really true. And how many people have been lifted out of poverty because of market mechanisms, capitalism, be it.
And how much innovation has happened, as a result. And so and that's a debate I'm happy to have, because it's not perfect, but it's also not purely, bad or evil at the same time.
Exactly. And I'm going to just tell people, look, if you've worked in a nonprofit, here's what you'll know. I'll bite my tongue on this, but I got to say it. You're going to work with a lot of people who probably aren't as good as people in the private sector. They're well-meaning, they're well-intentioned, they believe in the cause, but they may not have the skills and tools to get stuff done. This is what business education does. I want to ask you about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. Is it a threat? Is it a scary thing, or is it something we need to embrace? And how is Goizueta dealing with it?
So full disclosure, and this is, I'm not exaggerating, at all times, including right now, I have two windows open on my screens. One is ChatGPT and one is Bard. I use them for everything. And so, my view, I'm in N of one, so, I don't speak for everybody here at Goizueta or, all my colleagues across the world, but I will tell you that my perspective is it's not to be feared, it's to be understood.
Right.
And we have to understand how to use it in a way that takes advantage of its benefits, because it's coming. Let's not kid ourselves around whether we can press pause on this or whether we should or shouldn't. This is just like Google, a generation ago. It's just like the encyclopedia a few generations ago. This is the natural evolution of how we're going to research, how we're going to learn. Our job as educators is to make sure that we're finding ways to assess our students on their ability to think critically, their ability to master the content that we're trying to teach them and put into practice in ways that help them think critically. I do think that that's a unique role for us that AI just can't replace. But I think it's going to challenge us as educators to know that our students are using, today it's ChatGPT and Bard, but tomorrow who knows? They're using that to get to some level of answer. We have to work with that and to get them to think further, right? And I think that's our near-term challenge, right? But
Yeah,
it isn't. But it isn't whether or not we should be using these things or embracing these things, because they're using it. And I myself am using it. So, I raise my hand as somebody who really, I think these tools should be thought of as exactly that. I think they should be thought of as tools.
Yeah. And I mean, in one sense, I would think of ChatGPT and Bard as, instead of a flipped classroom, flipped learning. Here's what I mean by that. We've come to the agreement that the more mundane or routine parts of a course should be flipped so that your sessions are more dynamic and they're really using the experiences of the people in the class. And I think on some level, you can flip the learning so that the mundane stuff, the basic stuff, gets done with artificial intelligence, so that, again, you reserve the human interaction for the more dynamic exchange where you're learning from each other, not artificial intelligence or not what's on the internet. So the learning is much richer. So you take away the mundane stuff and you get to the best stuff right away. It's the icing on the cake.
Yep. Agreed. And it puts us in a position to ask our students, what do you think about that? How do you think about that? Let's give you the fact that you now know it because you've read it, and however it was generated, it was generated. But now we ought to be asking students how they think about that. What does that mean to them? And let them push and pull with critical thought on, whatever the tool generates. So I agree with that. It allows you to flip a lot of the learning.
So if someone is interested in Goizueta, what should they be doing? I know that they should come down and see Brian Mitchell. That's number one. But you have student ambassadors, so you can get to speak to current students. You mentioned earlier, which we didn't really talk about much, but you have an accelerated MBA program. You're one of the few highly ranked schools in the US that has a 1-year option.
Yes.
And maybe we should just mention who should take the 1 year versus the 2 year.
It's a great question, because I get that all the time around. Is it, what are the differences? Does it mean it's an MBA light or lightweight MBA? Not at all. So let's start with that. There are many more similarities between the 1-year MBA program and the 2-year MBA program. Then there are differences. It's still a Goizueta MBA. The right candidate, if you will, for a 2-year MBA is usually someone who is trying to transform their career in a way that requires an internship to make that pivot.
Mhm.
Whereas a 1 year, think about a 1 year MBA as a turbocharger for someone who is trying to accelerate their career, but not necessarily make a wholesale switch that's going to require an internship to make a pivot. That doesn't mean you can't make change. We have a lot of folks, and I'm pointing to the room next door because that's where they are, our 1 year MBA students. We have a lot of folks who are coming from industry and want to go into consulting. Well, consulting firms usually love industry experience that they can put in front of a client, sooner rather than later. So an internship's not always necessary for that kind of transition.
Right.
Um, so that being the difference, the similarities are very similar. We talked about things like global experiential modules, for example. Our 1 year MBA program students also have 2 global opportunities. They also have a client-facing impact project. And so there are many more similarities than people might think on the surface. It's just a matter of the return on investment for being out of the workforce, with less opportunity cost in the 1 year versus the 2 year. It's 3 semesters worth of learning and tuition versus 4. So there's those kinds of differences as well. But
And you start in May because you just entered your latest cohort.
start in May and you go 365 days, May to May, in the 1 year program. But our students students love it. I tell them the days are long, but that year is short. And they really get into that.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now let me come back to that question. What do you do? Okay, website's great. It's a good place to start to learn more about the program and all the options in it. Then what?
Yeah, so the website's goizueta.emory.edu.
Great.
So please start there, but connect with our admissions folks who will help you with getting a tour of the facilities, the building when you're here on campus. They'll help you understand the formal ways to get into the our recruiting events. We have Super Saturdays and all of these things that will be kind of a formal exposure. But if you can get here, it doesn't really matter when, right? If you can get here anytime that's not part of one of those formal programs, we'll be happy to walk you around the building and introduce you to current students any time of year, including the summer. And that's really important because this really is a special place. This really is not like every other business school. It's not an enormous sort of factory of students. This is a place where we personalize everything we possibly can. And I think seeing that and feeling that means a lot to students. That's why we invite you, we welcome you. It's a little bit of that Southern hospitality. And I'm a Chicago guy, so that Southern hospitality is something I had to learn. But I have absolutely embraced it in my Emory years. So come on down and see us here in Atlanta.
And let me give you a little tip. Okay, there is one day in the week when the kegs are tapped and the students gather in the courtyard, beautiful place at Goizueta, and share a beer together in stories. What day is that? Because that's the day you want to visit Goizueta.
Yes, that is absolutely true. What you're describing is what we call KEGS, and KEGS is not only literal, but it's also an acronym for keeping everyone at Goizueta social. So it's a family friendly. We invite our students with partners and pets and all that, and it's Thursday afternoons, starting around 4 o'clock. We all gather. There's beer and wine. There's also, I'm required to say this contractually, Coca-Cola products. So we have a wide range of Cokes, Diet Cokes, Sprites, Dasani water. If beer or wine is not your thing, but it's a great experience. You've experienced it personally, which I'm grateful for.
Yes,
you spending time with us. But anybody who wants to come is welcome. That's a great way to engage with us and with our student community.
Yeah, that's really true. And incidentally, for people who don't know, Coca-Cola is headquartered in Atlanta. The school is named after the legendary chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola for many years, Roberto Goizueta.
Yes.
So that's the connection. That's why other brands will never be served at the Goizueta business.
That's not so much of a secret. We're pretty public about that.
Hey, Brian, a real pleasure again. Thank you so much for doing this. I think we covered a lot of ground. Because the MBA program at Goizueta is a real specialized experience for people, and you guys have really done an incredible job over the years. And again, I think the placement rates are just a small part of the success story, but they're symbolic of everything you do with those MBAs when they arrive on campus.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
I appreciate the time always with you, John. Great to see you.
All right. And for all of you out there, this is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You've been watching our Center Court session on the Goizueta Business School with Brian Mitchell, who will become your friend, who will break bread with you, who will drink with you, who will deal with you when you hit a little hurdle here or there, because you may not know this, but he is a psychologist, he's a teacher, he's a mentor, he's a coach, and he's the secret to Goizueta's success. There you go.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's humbling. Tell my boss, John. Tell him.
High expectations, baby. Brian, take care.
All right. Thank you, sir. Take care of yourself.